Uh, hmm. Uh, Hi, good evening. Welcome to Tux TV. Nitty's going to be showing me shortly, but he either forgot or doesn't know how to get into the room. So I'm going to have to, send him a little something. I don't know exactly how to do that. Let's see if I can do this or this. So I got in a little conversation with a Christian today in which he did not like what I had to say, I don't think. He called us foolish, and I called him a liar. And once you know it, I said, Nitty, you're kind of good at this stuff. Why don't you and I just kind of tackle this guy? And I gave a nice little quote on the thumbnail of if you don't recognize this is a Star Wars quote. When the tractor beam pulls the Millennium Falcon onto, there he is, pulls the Millennium Falcon onto the Death Star. Obi-Wan Kenobi pops out of the little smuggling hold and says, "Who's the bigger fool, the foolish fool or the fool who follows?" So, okay. Nitty,
what up?
Let's get John. Oh, you're oblonged.
Hold on. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Did you did you watch that short that I sent you?
No, I'm going in dry.
You're going in dry? Well, I can spit on it if you want.
Let's see what we got here.
Let's just play this once.
Hang on, I'm trying to make sure that my channel's got this going too. I should be. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, he froze. What are we gonna do, folks? I said I was gonna go live every night. I didn't say I was gonna do it and start it alone. I mean, what do you wow. You thought that was gonna happen? No, you're wrong. So yeah, Tux is a TD bit frozen. I am not. So his internet must be taking a poop.
My internet's really bad tonight. I'm sorry.
Oh, it was. Geez.
I know. Well, let me do a little Sherry Poo.
Yes.
This is called Don't Be Foolish. This is from a channel called Trinity Joppa. And the person that's in this, his name is Ken Chaplin. Okay. I believe it is.
All right.
Is it Chaplin? No. Ken Coughlin. And by the way, I did send him a co-host invite on an email about 45 minutes ago. So if he pops in, it's go time.
That'll be by the grace of the God we don't believe in. So
that's right. That's right. So I'm going to try to add him. Share this tab instead. And let's see what we got here. How's that look?
Yeah,
does that look good? Now, I was not able to get the direct link. So the only way I can do this is to play it as a short, which limits me on where I can start it, and go to a certain section or anything. So I think I think as soon as I hit play, I think it's going to play from the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
We have all kinds of ancient documents about all kinds of things. If Jesus was, in fact, the big deal he's supposed to have been at the time, there would have been people who heard about that and wrote it down other than folks who were already in the cult. So the fact that doesn't exist is a big red flag.
You know, at some point when you hear atheists say things like this, you just have to ask whether they've done no research at all or they're deliberately lying to people, because there's really no other alternative. I mean, forget about the books of the Bible or even the early church fathers. In the 1st and 2nd centuries alone, you still have Roman historian Tacitus, Jewish historian Josephus, Roman historian Suetonius, Roman governor Pliny the Younger, Stoic philosopher Marabar Serapion, Greek satirist Lucian of Samosata, Greek philosopher Celsus, Greek historian Thales, and Greek writer Phlegon. Even skeptic Bart Ehrman says that Jesus is abundantly attested in early sources, and that any atheist who denies that fact just looks foolish.
We have...
All right. So I have lots of thoughts.
Do you have thoughts?
What are your thoughts?
Are you sure?
Yeah. So, like, do you want me to just rant? Because I can do that.
I was I also wanted to play some other things, but why don't we just start with this?
Let's start with this.
Do we want to go line by line? Do we want to pause it? Because there's so much to unpack. He's packed a lot in a, I don't even know how much of a clip that is. I mean, it's somewhere around 45 seconds, best guess.
Yeah. So here's my thing, right? Is that apologists take their listeners to the gas station and steal their car. They give them the pretense that they're going to give them something awesome, but then they just play a trick on them, basically, right? It's like a bait and switch, where the bait is, here's Jesus, here's how awesome it is, and I'm going to give you all this stuff. But the switch is hiding behind all the stuff that they just said, right? They're like, look, all this evidence, all this amazings, and they get to fire hose it out, and the listener goes, wow, he knows so much. I mean, the case must be so strong. I'm settled. You know, my analogies really sucked tonight. So forget all that. Edit those out. The stealing the car. No, that's terrible. It's terrible. Oh, okay. They're baking him a cake, and it looks good from the outside, but there's a bunch of.
There's nothing there.
There's a baby's diaper inside.
It is. It is a stinky poo cake. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So start it over.
It's like the Thanksgiving turkey in Christmas Vacation.
Yeah.
Looks great, smells great, and they crack it he slices it open, and poof, everything vanishes inside.
It's a turducken with a turd in it instead of a duck.
So I wanted to premise this with a little bit of a story, and I'm not sure how much I can show without getting, hit with the copyright
Stop it every
bug.
like 8 seconds.
Yeah. So I'm going to do,
make sure it's like a picture-in-picture kind of thing.
Yeah. Like this, or how about this? How about that?
Yeah.
All right. This is a moment in which David Chappelle finds out he's been duped. And I want to use this example through a lot of this because I feel like apologists play a certain role in getting people to be mindful of the things that he's accusing the atheist of being foolish of. And it's a bag of tricks. And one of the biggest bag of tricks I have ever seen in my life is finding out everybody's in on it but you. So this is a story about 3-Card Monte.
3-Card Monte. You know what that is? Yeah, the guy had the whole thing. The table was set up, and he had the 3 cards, and the crowd was hooting and hollering. And
all right, pay attention to that. The crowd was hooting and hollering.
He was like, find the red card, and people were playing. Sometimes they win, Sometimes they lose, but it was really exciting. And I'm standing there watching it, and I noticed while I'm watching them play this game that the red card, the one you're trying to find.
So he's learning the game and he thinks he's figured out a clue.
And just a little bend on the corner. And I'm watching it and I'm like, yo, this guy doesn't seem to know that red card is bent.
The guy doesn't see. I bet that guy doesn't know that the red card's bent. I got a one up. I got a sure thing. Thinking that you've got a sure thing in this world. Wonder what it gets you. A win or a loss.
I'm going to beat this motherfucker. And I walked up to the table and I said, let me play a hand. And I put my last $60 on that table and he starts to shuffle and find the red card, find the red card. And I kept watching that bent card go around the table, make sure I kept my eyes on that bent card. And when he stopped shuffling and he said, find the red card,
Think you found the red card?
Oh, let's see.
$60.
Where's
The
shell
last
game
60
going?
bucks he's got in his pocket. He's just a newbie. He's only 15 years old. He's only 15 years old in New York City.
pointed to it with confidence. Here it is right here. And he flipped it over.
Now, an apologist with all the confidence has all that list, that huge list of all those historians who saw Jesus and wrote about it.
No, just wrote about him. But go on.
And it was black.
The card was black. Now, how did that happen? He did his due diligence. He looked underneath and he thought he saw what should be there.
And he took my money. I couldn't fucking believe that. How did this nigga do that? Was that magic or sorcery? I was confused. So you know what I did?
What do you think he did? He observed some more.
I sat there. And I watched him for a real long time play the game. And I realized that all those people who was doing all that hooting and hollering and betting, my God, they were his friends.
Oh, man.
They were his friends. The difference between a truth and a lie isn't perception. It is how the game is rigged in your favor. And
Or
to
against
me,
you, but, yeah.
Ken here, when he makes that list, he says Jesus times, and then he says a list of the 3rd century, 2nd century. Nothing in the 1st century. There's nothing really in the 1st century.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him out. I basically said, hey, Tacitus is your first list. That's in the 1st century, but it's not about
2nd
Jesus.
century. Oh, yeah. Okay,
Tacitus is, I think, somewhere in the, or they don't know exactly when it is, but it's somewhere in the early 70s, mid 70s at the earliest, and in the late 70s at the latest, if I'm not mistaken.
It says on Wikipedia the Annals is 116, so that's early 2nd.
For Tacitus?
Yeah, the writing of the Annals. Let's see. Yeah, he refers to it in the Annals. Okay, execution looks authentic by Pilate. He doesn't reveal his source for that information.
If
So that's a problem.
Yeah. And so if somebody is observing, not Jesus. So let's go back to his accusation here. I wish I could fast forward to this. I'll just try to do it this way.
If Jesus was in fact the big deal he's supposed to have been at the time, there would have been people who heard about that and wrote it down.
All right. At the time. Now,
Right.
with a couple of the comments exchanged, I asked him to clarify what dates he thinks Jesus existed and what dates he thinks that the historical recording existed.
Mhm.
I did not get a reply from this. But in the comment, he had stated emphatically that just Jesus' ministry, the 3-year window, is all he's looking for. Now, I, of course, want to dispute that. If you've got a kid who's born of a virgin that there's a mass slaughter over being born, historians are going to see the birth historically.
It's just as significant as the 3 years of ministry, if not more. Right? Like,
and you have in Mark 3, 2 and 3, he's a kid talking to the rabbis, telling them he's wrong. He's a prepubescent.
He'd be 8 to 11.
8 to 11, prepubescent, whatever he is. So there's potentially something there as well that's in the Bible. So to say that there's just that 3-year window, I can give him that. But it just seems like there would be certain rumors already circulating that historically could be picked up.
Well, I mean, especially with the infants thing, right? There's a couple of things going on there. One, as I completely agree, that mass death of newborns to 2-year-olds in Judea, and no Jewish source. Josephus is like, what babies? Not important, right? like 2,000 babies. That's like what, 4,000 parents at least?
Yeah,
affected by that, and what, the grandparents too? Maybe, I don't know. A lot of kids that were circumcised, rabbis would have been like, oh my gosh, they all died at once. Or oh my gosh, this is how shitty the Herod is, right? Let's write that down, independent of Josephus or something. The other thing is that you can look at the slaughter of the infants as a parallel to the life of Moses, because the writer of Matthew is correlating that to something in Scripture. So his whole basis for many of the events in Jesus's early life is to peel them or mirror them with prior Scripture. It doesn't matter as much to him if they're actually historical. It matters that he can make something about the Jesus story relate back to the propheticness or types in the narratives that occurred before. So there you go. That's where I would land about the infants.
But there's reasons if there was God on earth, that historically, from birth to death and post-death, there should be, if this is an amazing being as it is supposed to be regarded, I would assume we would have something historically written directly about.
There are major figures in Josephus's narratives and Vespasian and whatnot, that their childhood and the vast majority of their life is not recorded, but the most important things of their lives are. So I guess you could give the Christians some credit that the most important things in Jesus' life were his birth, his shenanigans at the temple as a kid, and his ministry. So that's what ancient historical biography looks like, Tux. I mean, oh geez. So, let's just grant that part, that maybe the Gospels are something akin to history, but we can tear that apart later.
Yeah, I feel like we've got a lot to unpack in this.
Other than folks who were already in the cult.
All right. So there should be some writing of other than people who are in the cult. When Ken names the various historians, are any of those during the time other than people in the cult?
Nope.
No. What is so Josephus would be the first one that he mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like Tacitus was somewhere before Josephus, but
Well, Tacitus is drawing from sources that would be prior.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the Annals is placed around the early 2nd century, but the
No,
idea is that he's recounting things for decades prior that
and
they
then
don't have recorded yet.
So
let's
the
carry
the
this.
fact that doesn't exist is a big red flag.
All right, I agree. It's a big red flag to say that we have all these witnesses during the time of Jesus, whether it's about his ministry, whether it's post ministry. I feel like the sources should be a little closer to the time of Jesus. If he is a miracle baby, if he does draw out thousands being massacred as a prevention of the coming king, if there are crowds being accumulated on a mountainside or a riverside or a lakeside, a shipside, that there would be writings from somebody.
Oh, what was I going to say? Shit. It was related to that, and now I lost it. Damn it. Oh, Josephus. Let's crack. Well, play Ken, and then we'll crack into each one as he goes.
You know, at some point when you hear atheists say things like this, you just have to ask whether they've done no research at all, or
Do you think we've done no research at all?
No. I mean, we have done research, right? We listen to New Testament scholars that aren't just Bart Ehrman, right? You got like Matthew Munger. Let's see. Now my brain just went dead. John Dominic Crossan, Dale Allison. The list goes on, guys.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so many people to listen to that don't believe that Jesus is a miracle worker, but do believe and will place these documents in history. That's all fine, well and good. But the veracity of the spiritual claims are what they contest. Now, most Christians in 2023 in America have an epistemology inconsistency. Now, how I laid this out for some young Christian ladies I talked to yesterday was like this. I was like, okay, do you believe the election was stolen in 2020? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, good. But a lot of people in our country did and still do. So how much time has passed since the event until now, and you don't believe what they believe? And I said, people were ready to give their lives at the Capitol in 2 months from when they crafted their narrative of their Messiah. Well, I'm not going to pull the punch on that. People thought Trump was basically their Messiah for the country. And it took them 2 months to craft this narrative, to believe on him, and get prepared to give their lives for him. Now, our standard of evidence for their claims and their belief to do that action, our standard of evidence is really high for that, right? We look into the people who are making the claims about the process of the electors and all that stuff. We trust state governments to look at the evidence themselves, for the courts to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. The evidence is retested and it arrives at the same conclusion. Our standard for this part of our history is way up here, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of our sources count. All of our sources matter. We check them out. They're full of shit, and we can't believe this false legendary narrative that he's capable of doing this, that this man is the Messiah for this country. Now, what's the difference between that election and your Christian Testament? There's a huge one. Your standard for your belief in the history of your country is up here, but for your history of Jesus, it's down here in the basement, right? A legend can develop in 2 months that has forever changed how politics work for us. And yet, you're going to rest your eternal salvation on witnesses you can never interview. You can never actually determine that they are completely historical, who make fantastical claims 3, 4, 5 decades after the events that they record. If you're not satisfied with believing something that came about in 2 months, why are you satisfied with something that happened 2,000 years ago and came about 5 decades later? Please don't say forever. I wish I can't take that back. I can't take that back. That's like saying 9/11 didn't change things forever, or at least going forward, right? We have yet to observe a time where 9/11 hasn't had some vestigial impact on the way things have been going.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. And you know, they of course had a lot to say to try and defend their faith after that, right? That, okay, maybe the time thing, if that's not going to work, well, where else can we go, right? What other evidences do we have? And they tried to give me the cumulative case, and it was a lot of fun. But that's kind of like where I would press in like a comment section for someone like this, right? What's your standard to believe such and such is happening right now? And sorry for a second. That's right, Maya. What's your time gap standard for believing in the miracle claims of Jesus? It's a lot wider. So I would say that's a lower standard than how you live your life, than how you cast your vote. I'm done.
They're deliberately lying to people.
All right. Are we deliberately lying to people?
No, because I've read the early church fathers, but we'll go on to when he gets to that.
Because there's really no other alternative.
There's no other alternative. Difference of opinion, believing false things, but not lying could be a possibility, because that's what I accuse the Christian of being in the situation. Like, believing full faithfully in something that isn't true doesn't make it true, even though there's a lot of people that believe it's true, still doesn't make it true.
Yeah, it's the concept of being sincerely mistaken, and a lot of people don't like that. They don't like to imagine themselves as doing so much, believing so deeply in their heart, to be told or to discover it's false, and they've been mistaken for a long time. It hurts.
It is nice. Sorry, Ken. Sorry. Thanks, BS. I didn't notice until you said so.
Go on. That's what we got here.
Yeah, I did want to add one more thing, that when you have a religion that you preach from, Ken, I just feel like anytime somebody says something like this, and your faith-based religion is based on faith, a first century faith in which nobody can really agree about this, scholars versus Bible believers. Faith sounds a little bit too much like first century. Trust me, brah. Trust me, brah.
I mean, forget about the books of the Bible, or
I forget about the books of the Bible, or even
the early church fathers.
Okay.
Here we go.
What early church father do we have good writing of in the time of Jesus? Is Paul's letters the closest thing we would have?
I think the appeal here is it's an effort to say, get out of the circular reasoning trap. I believe the Bible because the Bible is true. Because the Bible is true, I believe in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the appeal of what he's saying is there are later people corroborating the events and story of the Bible. Now, here are the problems. One, they're just continuing the belief traditions that were passed down to them. It doesn't matter if those things actually happened at all. They're building on the narrative that they've already accepted, just like Mormons do, just like Muslims do, just like the Greeks did, the Hebrews, Jewish people. They continue to build on the narratives they already believed. Again, that does not make them true. Just because people keep record and developing the ideas of something that they already believe into something new doesn't make the thing that came before it true. The other problem is that they're more decades removed, right? Let's say they got a gospel in their hands and they're going to accept that and believe on Jesus on faith, and they're relying on a witness that they cannot verify, interview, look at, find some kind of direct evidence for the such and such that happened with Jesus, because they would be what's the word I'm looking for? A great distance away. They're a great time period away. They're a great distance away. They're a great financial burden away from trying to validate this story, because it was incredibly expensive for the non-elite to travel around. Okay, let's say the early church fathers were wealthy and they got to sow their oats of spirituality everywhere. Okay, one more problem. Read them. Go read Clement. Go read Octavie Poop Guy. Go read
Jesus Ben Sirach.
No, not that one.
Not that one.
But just okay, maybe that
I
one
almost
too.
contributed.
The Epistle of Barnabas. Just read the documents that are supposedly attributed to these church fathers and believers. You know what you're going to find? One, if you look at them from Christian points of view, they'll say, look, Clement's quoting Matthew. Clement's quoting Mark. Clement's quoting Luke. You know what would really help the case for that to be true is if Clement wrote, as was said by Matthew, Jesus said. As was said by Luke, Jesus said.
Mm-hmm.
Not once,
No.
not a single time are any of the sayings of Jesus, any of the teachings of Jesus attributed to another believer anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, chain of custody of these beliefs. It's just, we have a tradition of something Jesus said. Where it came from doesn't fucking matter. But we're going to put it in here because it's relevant to the theological point I want to make. Now, where was I going with this too? Oh, right. And the final thing that I want to say about this is that when Christians make those connections and say, oh, Clement or such and such early church father is quoting a gospel, it doesn't match up. It's not a perfect one-to-one correspondence with any of them. It's almost as if there's some malleability to these oral traditions. Whoops. So there you go. Though, I got really frustrated actually doing that. I went to like earlywritings.org or whatever. And I started just glancing my way through these early Christian documents that were post gospel, post epistle. And I'm like, wait a minute, where's the cross references other than what Christians say the cross references are? The text doesn't have them. Wait, why don't these kinds of sayings completely line up? They're kind of like a cousin marriage between two gospels of what this saying is or something like that. And the rest of it's just esoteric spiritual stuff or Paul's teaching, which is, secondhand on top of that. So
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of things that it is impossible, in my opinion, for the Matthew 4 and Luke 4 story to be told without quoting somebody. because there's only two people in the conversation.
Oh,
It doesn't preface with Jesus told me this story one time. It's prefaced with we're gonna start the mission now, and our ministry is going, and I'm gonna go out in the wilderness, and what do you know, the devil's there. And to me, there's a 50-50 chance that the devil tells the story in Luke 4. that the 50-50 chance that the devil tells the story in Matthew 4. And I can read it that way and say, you know what? If this came from the devil, he told the truth about what happened in a certain point of view.
that's fine.
And that's why P-Town, of course, thinks that I'm asking him to worship the devil instead.
Oh my God.
I'm like warning you that you have been tricked. You have been tricked by the devil, not the other way around. But in all of this, it's a literary narrative. A writer is writing something. He's using tools that are to focus you and pinpoint you on, very similar to the way Dave Chappelle told that story. He has a premise to the story, he has a middle, and he has a lesson, and then he has the conclusion. And you see that type of writing over and over again. To me, this is why you have the devil there. This is why you have Jesus being accused of being these things. It's just the writer's tool. It's not recording something that happened. The things that really happened were the preaching. Human preachers existed at that time. Jesus, to me, was just one of the regular old human preachers that got loved and beloved. And then one day he was gone. He was politically hit. He didn't get born of a virgin, and he didn't die and resurrect. And everything that you see in between that is exaggerated, either by the writer, either by legendary development, you see everything kind of fall into line, in my opinion, as a difference between what I refer to as inert Jesus, the invisible parts of Jesus that were kind of made up, and human Jesus that was just an apocalyptic preacher who was saying, hey, the Romans are coming, we're about to all die. And here's the way we should behave so that we are better people, better than the Romans.
One of my new favorite questions to someone is, are omniscient narrators evidence for, or if there's an omniscient narrator in a text, does that read to you more like fiction or nonfiction? And if someone is honest, they say, well, that reads like fiction. And I say, well, the Gospels are full of omniscient narration.
Yeah.
Where there's no one else present to recount the story, right? There's details that could not come from, any apostle eyewitnessing it, because the story tips its hand and says it was just Jesus and the devil. Yeah. It was just Jesus before the Roman authorities. It was just Jesus praying alone on a mountainside, right? Like,
yeah,
you can't corroborate any of that without it becoming secondhand. And the only escape hatch a believer has at that point is divinely inspired.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said it many times, but keep in mind, Jesus is regarded as a criminal. Whether you think whatever he did was worthy of death or not, in that time, at that age, he was a criminal. And he got treated as a criminal. Maybe right now it'd be considered excessive force. The crime doesn't fit the punishment. But at that time, obviously, he was a criminal enough to get arrested. And a human being getting arrested is no big deal. The sizzlemanship now that we see from the narrative, that to me is inert Jesus. That Jesus doesn't exist. That is just a inanimate gas just floating in the ether. And that's it. So let's go back to Ken.
Yeah.
In the 1st and 2nd centuries alone, you still have Roman historian Tacitus.
Okay, 1st and 2nd centuries alone, we have Tacitus. Now, I bring up the comment that Tacitus is not recording what Jesus did. He's acknowledging that there's Christians, and his first impression of these Christians is that they are evil and superstitious. That is not a good firm foundation to build your argument on, in my opinion.
Yeah, and making that case that, oh, there were Christians at this time and here's what they're doing. Again, not evidence of Jesus, but also, when did that start? Did it start at some supposed criminal trial of Jesus and his death and resurrection, or were there Christians before that? We can't
I think
really
there
know.
were followers of apocalyptic preachers. I think Jesus and his little sect was one of a dozen, maybe even more, at the time. And you had, John the Baptist, that Jesus got a little enamored with his preaching and then became the heir apparent when he got politically hit. And then then Jesus himself got politically hit. Human Jesus, not God Jesus. I don't believe there's such thing as God Jesus, just to clarify.
All right, next one.
Jewish
Josephus.
historian
Okay.
Josephus.
My favorite thing now about Josephus that I discovered is, Christian apologists and church services and the Frankie Tureks and the Lee Strobels and J. Warner Wallace, they'll get that one Josephus quote that's contested as for its authenticity. I'm not as good at arguing that. They'll cherry pick that one out and say, he's recorded, and it says the Christ. Amazing. I have a very obvious problem with that, is that read everything that comes before it and read everything that comes after it.
Mm.
And then, how you do that? You just put your hand over it and it'll read just fine.
It'll read just fine. And the reference to how much is written there and how insignificant Jesus is. Because
Right.
there are moments,
authentic, right? And then
there are moments of discussion about invasion that are pages and pages long. And various priests who had administered their services that are full pages long, and Jesus just has this
one
little, almost insignificant.
Roman historian Suetonius.
Hold up. So, other thing about Josephus is go through his works and do a Control F and type in Jesus.
Yeah, there's a lot of Jesuses in Flavianum. I want to say there's about a dozen Jesuses, and then if you add, is it his annals? I didn't mean that way.
There are a lot of Jesuses inserted in his.
And if you add some of his other writings, you can almost double that. I don't know if you can double it, but it's close.
Well,
it's hard to tell which ones he's repeating. Sometimes there's a whole family of Jesuses that were like a Jewish temple, the Jewish temple high priests.
Mm-hmm.
Like 4 out of 5 Jesuses mentioned on one page are heir apparents to the high priest, and those are recorded.
Or they're in religious, political fights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but there's
there's one that I can probably play a clip from Bart Ehrman that I have queued up that we'll play in the last.
Ananias.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. That's the one I found, and I'm like,
Yes.
did John, the writer of the Gospel of John, just freaking copy this?
There is a dispute. Bart Ehrman can go over that. We can play the clip of him. I have a Holy Kool-Aid clip. I specifically brought it up for how much Bart Ehrman despises the conversation around mythicism, but also to show that Ken is clearly quote mining.
Right.
A
contested one.
Yeah.
Roman governor.
Did you have any information on Suetonius? I didn't even pay attention to Suetonius. Honestly, I didn't even know he existed. Honestly, I haven't looked him up. I don't care about him. Playing the Younger, I've heard, but Playing the Younger's quite a bit into the 2nd century. Like,
hang on. Yeah, so I think that's like the worship of one called Crestus, but again, that's the same thing. It only is recounting what people believed, not that that person actually existed. This person was doing all kinds of crazy shit in Rome and Judea. Just a passing mention of what they believed. Well, sorry about hitting my table, y'all. Sorry.
I mean, I don't want to call him names.
Yeah, I know. Let's try not to be mean about appearances unless it's like a funny facial expression. That's kind of...
So Suetonius just it's the confusion between Christus and Christos. That's why he's insignificant.
Pliny the Younger.
Yeah, Pliny the Younger has some substance, but it's quoting somebody else, if I'm not mistaken. And once again, it's not discussing Jesus, it's discussing what Christians are doing.
Yep.
Stoic philosopher
Marabar Serapion.
Familiar with him?
No, actually.
Oh, shoot. Crap.
We have all kinds of ancient documents about all kinds of things. If Jesus was in fact the big deal he's...
Let's see if we can find him while I catch back up. I am not familiar with him. But I can almost promise you it's not what he's bragging about here.
What? So, like, I'm looking at the... Here, what advantage did the Jews gain from executing their wise king? It was just after their kingdom was abolished. God justly avenged these 3 wise men. The Athenian died of hunger. The Cimmerians were overwhelmed by the sea, and the Jews, desolate and driven from their own kingdom, live in complete dispersion. But Socrates is not dead because of Plato. Neither is Pythagoras because of the statue of Juno. Nor is the wise king because of the new law he laid down. So, like, one, it's vague. It's the wise king, which could be the Essenes' teacher of righteousness that was driven out of the temple and whatnot. And he was trying to revise and revitalize the law in a new kind of interpretation. And, you know, the children of light, the children of darkness, check it out. So that's a problem. And the other thing that Suetonius seems to be doing here is, think about this. He says Socrates is not dead because of Plato.
Mm-hmm.
Neither is Pythagoras because of the statue of Juno. Nor is the wise king because of the new law he laid down. So it's not referring to a resurrection at all, right? whoever this wise king is, he's living on through some kind of artifact, some kind of cultural memory that's being continued. Like Socrates is living on because people remember Plato because he was taught by Socrates,
Mm-hmm.
right? Pythagoras is being remembered because there's a freaking statue related to some shit he did. I don't know about that one. And this wise king lives on through whatever this law is and however people are living by it.
So does it say Jesus specifically?
No.
So it could only be one king.
Oh, totes.
Interesting. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
It just
So it's a
smacks
stretch.
of- yeah,
It's a
yeah, yeah.
stretch.
It's like what do they call that? Parallelomania?
I don't know what they call it. I would
Well, that's
call
what they
it.
accuse what Dennis McDonald's work of doing, right?
Hmm.
Finding
yeah.
these correlations between Greek gods and the cultural milieu of heroic narratives and whatnot.
Yeah, it's stereotyping the storytelling. Like
Right.
every single story that you love has something like have you seen there is a short out there of comparing Star Wars to Jesus,
Oh yeah.
that basically the storytelling elements are basically, in a parallel, just like you said. All right, let's see who's next.
Philosopher Marabar Serapion, Greek satirist Lucian of Samosata,
Greek satirist Lucian Salmasoto. I am not familiar with them either, but I can almost promise you he's in the 2nd or 3rd century, and just like our friends, the Stoic philosopher Marabar Serapion,
He's 100 years removed.
100 years removed. His birth or his writing?
Almost 100 years removed from his birth, from Jesus's purported. Well, no. Yeah, purported death. There we go. So he's
Purported death.
almost 100 years from Jesus' death,
And
probably geographically distant. And once again, he's critical of Christians, not necessarily giving evidence that, wow, Jesus really did all the things.
yeah,
Because I saw that with my own eyes. No.
so he's a critic.
Mhm.
So a critic is clearly, because a satirist is definitely going to be like us.
Right. Yeah.
Greek philosopher Celsus,
Okay. So Celsus, the only way we know about him is through, I think, like Origin, where or
He's
what's
the
other
one that's in
guy?
the debate with Origin, or
No. Hang on. What's that guy? Eusebius in church history. I think that's what it is.
yeah.
Where
We don't have his
So-
works. We have Eusebius's quoting.
right. Yeah, basically. And like, here's what the opponents were, and this is how shitty they were, right? And Celsus bakes. Well, it's funny because Celsus is like, Christianity or these Christ followers, the religion is for people who are easily fooled.
Yeah,
Easy to
that is a perfect
manipulate,
description.
easily fooled. Yeah, basically, these people are just completely credulous. I just can't believe that this is a true religion because of how dumb these guys are.
It's a perfect way to explain it. And you know what? That's why I showed the David Chappelle story, because it just seems like all it takes is for somebody to get into the club is to be tricked by a whole bunch of people who are in on it. You don't realize it's rigged until you sit there and watch for a while. Just like those of us who are fools.
Greek historian Thales, and Greek writer Phlegon.
Thales? Any information on Thales?
No, those are like the limits that I have right there.
Even skeptic Bart Ehrman says that Jesus is abundantly attested in early sources, and that any atheist who denies that fact just looks foolish.
Okay.
Well, we don't. Well,
Here's
I
the
don't.
thing. I have the clip. I have a clip of what Bart Ehrman says. So let's give
Quote mining.
yeah, quote mining, exactly. So Bart Ehrman is just pissed off at the line of questioning he's getting from Holy Kool-Aid. I mean, literally, he's pissed off. Look at the scowl on his face right here.
Oh yeah, that's great.
He is furious at this line of questioning. And he's been questioning him basically from the mythicist view. All right? So let's see what Thomas has to ask and watch the sourpuss McGee face from Dr. Bart Ehrman.
There's no pushback against that, but when it comes to Jesus, all of a sudden there's like how would we, this question specifically says, setting aside the patent absurdity of the story, the miraculous accounts and what have you, how do you distinguish between a mythic personification and an actual person? The real question should be, is the consensus of a real person based on a full spectrum of fair consideration, or are there natural biases with certain ancient figures? Why do we assume?
All right. Do you understand that question? What are your thoughts on the question?
Replay it. I feel dumb.
Would we, this question specifically says, setting aside the patent absurdity of the story, the miraculous accounts and what have you, how do you distinguish between a mythic personification and an actual person? The real question should be, is the consensus of a real person based on a full spectrum of fair consideration, or are there natural biases with certain ancient figures? Why do we assume Zeus is mythic and not Jesus?
Look, I have no bias about Jesus. I mean, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe he's the Son of God. What kind? But the question is asking, why would I think Jesus existed but Zeus did not?
What are the different methods that would be
Zeus?
used?
Zeus is what? I don't even understand the question. I mean, Zeus is a god. He's not a human.
So is Jesus.
No, Jesus is a human. I don't believe that Jesus was God.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about the man, Jesus.
The kernel that it's based on.
I'm sorry. Look, if you want
The disdain that he has for this line of thinking is clear. This is not him telling atheists they're wrong. This is him telling mythicists. Mythicists think that Jesus was just a completely written story. There is evidence that there was a human preacher who talks very similar to today's preacher about get right with God. Can't you see what's going on in Gaza versus Israel? Get right with God. This is the end times. It was predicted. How many of those are out there? How many are kind of in the category of false teachers, false prophets? How many of them out there are singing the song of demons, demons everywhere? Pastor Vlad, Greg Locke, some of the Southern Baptist spirited preachers, Kenneth Copeland. List goes on and on, right? How many of them are saying doomsday type of scenarios? See, the devils are winning. Send your money to me so we can be the good.
Beat the devils.
We can beat the devils. To me, there was a preacher who was saying these type of things. The difference was they were living in a world that was about to be invaded by a massive, powerful army. And they had a good following because they wanted to get right with God. Whether they were telling the truth or telling a good narrative, or people were desperate and they thought they had nothing less to lose, as in a Pascal's wager. That's what you're seeing unfold here. Bart Ehrman believes that there was a preacher, a human rabbi preacher, apocalyptic in nature, saying you better get right with God. This is how we can be good. Here's the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Plain, and the Sermon on the Mount. Preacher after preacher, bringing in converts, bringing in sacrifices. to make a living. Some of them thinking that what they're doing is good. Some of them have ill intent.
Want to do history, you need to learn how historical method is done.
So he's purely talking about history. Mythicism is not good history. This is the point that he's doing.
You can't say that because Zeus didn't exist, then maybe Jesus didn't exist. That's like saying, I mean, what is it like saying? It's like, I mean, I'm sorry, that isn't a serious conversation. Really? You mean if Bilbo Baggins didn't exist, then therefore Abraham Lincoln probably didn't exist? Well, I don't get it. Bilbo Baggins isn't documented as a historical figure. The Apostle Paul knew Jesus' brother. How many people knew Zeus's brother? And you're wrong, by the way, to say that there's no question about Moses. There are lots of historians who think there was a Moses figure, and they have some evidence for it. So it isn't just that you kind of blow it off because you think it's weird. You have to look at the evidence. And if you aren't willing to look at evidence, you can say anything you want. But if you look at evidence, you're in a completely different ballgame now.
Yeah. And I'm gonna keep twisting your buttons a little bit just because I've got more of these comments to throw at you to get your feedback. So
Jesus,
here's another
At least
one.
he
Of
has a
course,
good
Jesus
laugh
never-
about it afterwards.
Yeah, here's the thing. There's going to be more friction with this mythicism type of claim. But historically, Bart is only talking historically. Keep that in mind. No matter what I say, as soon as I utter the word Jesus, the entire Christian nation goes, aha! Jesus is God. No, he is not. He is an inert being other than the human preacher he was. Born with a human vagina, a human penis, interacted. A human child was born of that interaction. There was no miracle birth. There was no dying and resurrecting 3 days later. The human did human things. When he died like a human. He did not resurrect like a god. And there is no evidence in your holy book, in my opinion, zero evidence exists in your holy book that there was a God Jesus. It is all human narrative, human writing. We'll touch on this after this clip's done. You want anything?
When Bart said that Jesus, that Paul, rewind. When Bart says that Paul knew Jesus's brother, that I do see a problem with that. One, you have to make the assumption that that particular letter or statement about the Apostle Paul, I think, wouldn't you have to? Yeah, I think you can only get that from the Book of Acts, right?
Well, I don't know if he's using the historical references of Josephus or not.
No,
But
he's not.
Paul clearly knows, and it depends on whether James the Just is Jesus's brother, like step sibling, or sibling, or if James the Just is some variation of the church brother, the brothers and sisters in Christ type of reference. I'll let you look. I'll play more Bart.
Okay, so if you're willing to question the historicity of the Book of Acts, which I am,
Oh, without a doubt.
Let's see.
Who wrote the Book of Acts?
Right, Luke
Luke.
purportedly.
And who was Luke to Jesus?
Right.
He was nothing. He was nothing to Jesus. Jesus didn't know him. As far as I can tell, Luke was just a companion of Paul. It's my understanding there's a good chance he was Paul's speechwriter / secretary / he was something to Paul.
So in Acts, it just says James spoke up, but we don't know which one, because
there's
multiple
James,
Jameses
son of Zebedee. There's
James the Just, or
James the
whatever.
Just. Yeah.
So that's a problem. So if Paul is there at the Council of Jerusalem, we're not sure which James he's exactly interacting with or listening to.
Yeah.
And, the language of brother post-gospel, well, not post-gospel, pre-gospel, really, of familial relations is not blood relation in most cases.
I do play fast and loose with James the Just is Jesus's brother, because it is recorded that James became the church head at some point. And if you want to argue that one of his siblings believed that he was Jesus, that's fine and dandy, but you have however many other siblings that did not.
Right.
I think there's a ratio of about 5 to 1.
Well, if the James that they want to say interacted with, that was like some kind of blood relation to Jesus, then you've got some real problems, Catholics, with the ever Virgin Mary.
Well, the ever Virgin Mary actually has to do
Joseph's
with
sons. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, the perpetual virgin narrative, I think, has to do with more of the way Mary was born in that scenario. I could be wrong, though.
No. Yeah. She can't be sullied by a penis. Anyway, we're way off topic.
Yeah.
Go on with Bart.
Never existed. Even Paul never puts him here on earth, but in a spiritual realm.
Oh, yeah. Where does Paul do that exactly?
And then he
does it in 1 Corinthians 15.
15, yeah.
He does it in the later chapters in the 40s.
Well, yeah, and then
Where does Paul do that?
2 Corinthians 10 is like the whole, I know a man who is taken to the third heaven, which has a bunch to do with like the belief in like different divine realms and layers of the spiritual, whatever. I don't want to do it.
I don't know. I'm just reading the comment.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. People say this. Like, Paul has Jesus being crucified in heaven. Okay? Show me what verse that one's in.
I'm not familiar
Paul
with
says
that.
he was born of a woman. He says he was born a Jew. He says that he had a brother named James. I mean, Paul talks about things that Jesus said. He talks about what he said at the Last Supper.
Mm-hmm.
Paul knew Jesus' brother James, and Paul knew his closest disciple, Peter. Look, the only way to write these things off is simply to have an agenda where you are certain that there couldn't be a Jesus, and because you've got a reason for thinking that. There's nobody who would go into this open-minded, who would just look at the evidence and it would even occur to them. And I'm not talking about Christians. I don't know any historians who take this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Historians. That's a key word. Historians.
I mean, I've got hundreds and hundreds of colleagues in history department. They aren't Christians. Mm-hmm. They just know how to do history. So why is it the mythicists make fun of us for doing history and think that, well, don't you realize that Jesus was crucified in heaven? Where are you getting that from?
So I have seen a strong case. Let me rephrase that. I have seen a case made that some of Paul's writings actually occurred prior to Jesus.
Yeah, there's some people who try to make that.
And I've seen the argument. It's insignificant in my opinion. Even if it's true, and Paul just kind of plagiarized somebody else named Paul, and got away with it. I mean, how it was an accepted practice sometimes to kind of bring modern contemporary the same old thought process. I mean, you kind of see it among the Greek philosophers doing the same thing. I mean, it's not like Stoics are original. They were getting it, they were getting it from someplace else. It was an evolution of thought processes.
Yeah.
Besides somebody else who told you that.
Yeah,
And it's something you want to know. You want to believe it, so you believe it. Well, okay, I don't think there's a moon landing.
Yeah. Well, one of the pushbacks that I got in a comment was, just because Paul says he's born of a woman doesn't mean he was, but that's not the argument being made. It's saying that Paul saying that Jesus was born of a woman is proof that Paul is not arguing that Jesus is up in this heavenly realm exclusively.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's a weird thing to say he was born of a woman, but he has reasons to say it. But, it's not... yeah. I know mythicists get really upset that New Testament scholars don't take them seriously. I know that. Mm-hmm. But you need to come up with better arguments.
Well, here's one that might be a little bit of a better argument, hopefully.
Good.
Reading the sources, there were the Docetists, and he has 2 John in parentheses, who were a sect of Christians who did not believe that Jesus came in the flesh, but came in spirit only. It was a very early Christian dispute, and Dr. Ehrman did not address it, not to mention all of the Greco-Roman influences into Christianity. I think that that's pushback to the claim you said no one in ancient times claimed Jesus didn't exist. And
the Docetists thought Jesus existed.
But this is a claim that there was no fleshly Jesus, that it's this...
No. This is completely misunderstanding Docetism. And if you don't think I know about Docetism, I've written extensively about Docetism. So if they want to know something about Docetism, read my book on the Orthodox corruption of Scripture, because I
actually learned about Docetism through misquoting Jesus. Your book. Yeah,
but they've misunderstanding if they think that this indicates that Jesus was not a being on earth. What they think is what the Docet. So first of all, 2 John does not mention Docetism. So I'm not sure what they're. I guess there is a passage in 1 John, and there's a kind of a brief reference to it in 2 John, but they're not called Docetists, and we don't know about Docetists per se until the 2nd century. But these are kind of forerunners of Docetism. These people do not deny that there is a man Jesus. Docetists do not deny there's a man Jesus. What they think is that the person who was the man Jesus was in fact a divine being who did not have real flesh and blood, but he was still a person on earth who spoke, who did things, who did miracles, who was active with his disciples. They did not think he was a myth. Quite the opposite. They definitely did not think he was a myth. And so you can't use the Docetists. So why would I mention Docetists? I mean, it's not that I don't know about Docetists. I think I can give you a pretty good history of Docetism.
Okay. Can I ask you one more question?
Sure.
You said that there was that it's possible that Luke was copying from Matthew rather than having a separate source, or that Matthew's copying from Luke, but you said that there's very, very good reasons to think that that's not happening.
Yeah.
What are those reasons?
Okay, it's complicated. So Matthew and Luke and Mark, the three of them have many stories in common that are sometimes word for word the same. And so somebody's copying somebody. And there are pretty good reasons for thinking that Matthew and Luke both used Mark. It would take me 5 minutes to explain the reasons, but they're so convincing that since the 19th century, just about everybody who's tried to study this thing has said, yeah, that's probably right. Matthew and Luke also have a number of sayings of Jesus that they have in common that are not found in Mark. So they had some source for that, but it's not Mark. And so the question is, did Luke copy Matthew? Did Matthew copy Luke? Or did they both copy a different source? So the argument, I'm not sure I can do this very quickly, effectively, but I talk about this in a number of my books. When Matthew and Luke have these materials that are not found in Mark, they are almost always in a different sequence in their Gospels. So the Lord's Prayer will be here in Matthew and it'll be down here in Luke. The Beatitudes will be here in Luke and it'll be up here in Matthew. And so they're in different sequences. But the stories from Mark are almost always in the same sequence. What that suggests is that if Matthew had copied Mark and that Luke had copied Matthew, then it means that whenever Luke was copying Matthew, he had a copy of Mark on his lap and a copy of Matthew on his lap. And whenever he ever crossed a story in Matthew, he'd look up to see if it's in Mark. If it's in Mark, then he'd keep the order. If he saw it's not, he'd read through all of Mark to see it's not there, then he would change the order. It's like, what? Nobody writes a book like that. And so it's more likely that they both have some other source of sayings. They've got Mark, they copy Mark. They don't know what the sequence of sayings are. They're just like sayings. And so they plug them in at different places. And so that's the argument. It's the argument of sequence.
Fantastic. If I had more time, I would love to.
So I actually found a page while we were listening to this about the Born of Woman passage, and it critiques Ehrman's work. So do we want to read that?
All right, let's do it.
All right, so let's.
So let me do this real quick. Let's go back to this. I'll add that on here in a second.
Yeah, you're good. So now we're gonna get all scholarly and shit, y'all.
Yeah. All right.
We're gonna.
This is what he says about Bart Ehrman and us foolish atheists. Oh, shoot.
Ehrman says that Jesus is abundantly attested in early sources, and that any atheist who denies that fact just looks foolish.
Okay. A, it's not atheists that Bart is pointing the finger at. It's mythicists.
Yeah.
And B, there is zero, again, let's reiterate what Bart says. There's zero effects of Jesus being a god.
Right. That are Christian. Yeah.
Yeah. Zero.
All right.
So
let's
add yours. Do you have control? I think you're able to add it. Here, let's
okay.
This here.
Let's
close.
For how small
this.
that text is, we're probably gonna have to hide. Can we hide ourselves and leave the?
Yes, I sure can.
All right. So, this
Make
guy.
the chat off.
I don't think that matters for
Okay.
the screen share. So I've seen stuff like this before, and I know it's JesusPuzzle.com, blah blah blah. You know, let's check the citations here. Oh fuck, whatever. I've seen work like this before, and this is not Carrier. So, let's look at this. Okay, let's go to textual corruptions, and that's something that Ehrman likes to talk about, right? All right, so. In addition to the observations made earlier, the analysis of the surrounding text would make, quote, born of a woman born under the law, irrelevant to it and not likely to have been included by Paul. There's another consideration which works in favor of interpolation. So what Ehrman just said about Paul saying that Jesus was born of a woman can be contested and may even be a later insertion, and here's why. First, for this, we must go to a groundbreaking and influential book published in 1993 by Bart D. Ehrman, The Orthodox Corruption of Scripture. Ehrman's exhaustive study of the extant texts of the New Testament led him to realize that over the course of the early centuries from which we have a surviving record, beginning after the year 200, numerous amendments and insertions were made by Christian scribes to many passages. As Ehrman says in his introduction, my thesis can be stated simply. Scribes occasionally alter the words of their sacred texts to make them more patently orthodox and to prevent their misuse by Christians who espoused aberrant views. Ehrman explores the ways proto-Orthodox Christians used literature in their early struggles for dominance, as they produced polemical treatises, forged supporting documents under the names of earlier authorities, collected apostolic works into an authoritative canon, and insisted on certain hermeneutical principles for the interpretation of these works. It was in the milieu of this controversy that scribes sometimes changed their scriptural texts to make them say what they were already known to mean. All right, so this is just a quote here. Let's go for, I'm going to go, okay. In a section entitled Christ, I'm going to skip a little bit to this. Christ born human, in his chapter Anti-Docetic Corruptions of Scripture. See, he studied Docetism. Ehrman has pointed out that Galatians 4:4 was indeed a passage that was a favorite for amendment. The Greek genomenon ek gunaikos was occasionally changed to genoimemon ek kunakos, Jesus. From the verb, yeah, I'm not re-saying those. The latter being the verb that everyone, including Tertullian, has acknowledged was the plainer word for being born in the human way. Similarly, in Latin manuscripts, says Ehrman, factum, made, was changed to natum, born. Clearly, such later scribes, faced with Gnostic doctrine that Jesus had not been born a real human, but only in the semblance of one, that he had passed through Mary without taking on any of her human substance, felt that the verb genomai was not explicit enough, and substituted for genao did ultimately survive and become part of the received text. So if that just went whoosh over your head, basically the scribes were like, holy shit, we've got these guys saying that Jesus wasn't completely real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, I guess, maybe we should hide chat. If it's overlaying, then yeah. Anyway, so even Ehrman is like, hey, and this is contrasting what he's saying to Holy Kool-Aid a bit, right? Ehrman's like, look, I can acknowledge that these concepts of being of spiritual birth and natural birth are in contest in the early Christian sources. So which is it, Ehrman? Is it possible that Galatians 4:4 is not a literal birth?
Well, everything's possible. Do
Right,
we
well,
have any
but he-
older
he had-
transcripts that show the change?
I'll get to that.
You are okay.
I was skimming this. So Ehrman acknowledges that there is evidence evidence that discounts the historical birth of Jesus to Mary as like a literal vaginal birth. Okay? So when he gets all snubby and mad at Holy Kool-Aid for that question, and he said he studied Docetism, his earlier work indicates that he could have left this open up to interpretation. So now he's all mad. It's not a serious question, and he's now seemingly like forgotten that this could go either way in some way, and is now less charitable to that view than what he wrote about.
You know, to strongman this a little bit, Bart's position. I just want to point out that comparing this Docetism claim as a parallel with mysticism that's countered by historical and the context of the conversation he was having, this would then indicate that he's defending the historical. Now, is there a chance that this is true? Yes. But that doesn't change the historical, no matter what this open interpretation could be.
Right. So here's the 2nd century reconstruction of what Marcion believed that Galatians said. Okay, this is really. Yeah, so Marcion, he made his own New Testament, didn't like the Hebrew Scriptures God, so, the the proto-Orthodox Christians really frickin' hated him for this.
Uh-huh.
So let's see how the passage would read if the phrases in, these are the contested phrases: born of a woman, born under the law. Let's see how it read if those phrases were dropped. And in fact, a context does exist in which those phrases do not appear, not in the form of any extant manuscript of Galatians, which does not contain them, yet something pointing to that very thing. The following is a reconstruction of the passage from a version of Galatians used by the quote-unquote Gnostic, which just meant not everybody else Christian in the mid-2nd century. Although a copy of Marcion's document is not extant, scholars have reconstructed it from Tertullian's against Marcion, in which Tertullian in great detail takes Marcion to task for adultering the true original of Paul's letter. From that work, Marcion's version of Galatians 3:4-6 has been put together as follows. As a man I say, when we were barely born, we were enslaved under the elements of the cosmos, but when the fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son that he might purchase those under the law and that we may receive adoption. God sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you see what's missing here? It would be, but when this fullness of time came, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, that he might purchase those under the law. See where the omission would be?
Have you read this Tertullian recreation before?
No.
This is the first time hearing of it.
Yeah, I think Carrier mentioned something about this at some point, but this guy is not a big, from what I gather, he doesn't mention Carrier's work at all. All right, these phrases, born of woman, born under the law, are passed over without comment if they were indeed in Marcion's epistle. If they were not, it would have never crossed Tertullian's mind to think that the phrases were in his own copy half century later might have been added, that Marcion's version represented the original. So yeah, there, if you want to read this later, I mean, this is like the work of a non-believer back when, websites had HTML on them, right? So yeah, that's just one piece, right? And I know Carrier has a whole bunch on the use of the Greek word birth there. And I think that's interesting too, that's a bit compelling, that, like what I read earlier of Ehrman's own work, that it's odd that everywhere else the Christian Testament talks about birth, it's a completely different word. And it has a very normative sense of out of the vagina, born. Right? Real world, physical thing, born. But in this one place, that's not there until later. So I find that super fascinating. Just the fact that stated that go for that.
Marcion. Is it Marcion or Marcion?
Marcion.
Spanish Luca. Huh.
Oh, yeah. And there's some other weird things that Paul wouldn't necessarily need to say if those things were already the case, or those things were already known. It's like, why are you kind of being redundant, I guess? But I don't know. So yeah, that's for further reading and homework, y'all. Have fun. Yeah. Earl Doherty also tackles this passage. I think I have that book on my Amazon Kindle. Hang on. So this is stuff I've read before, and I'm not particularly bothered by. Oh, this would piss off Oz from Tang or what, and now the flavor or whatever. Because I got into a little tussle with him over my position, which is I'm fine with a historical Jesus person like you are, right? Apocalyptic preacher, did a bunch of things, probably died, and it really sucked. But I am a Christ mythicist. So the ideas of like the dying, rising Messiah, the miracles, all this stuff, maybe it was a Jesus in the heavens, that Paul, hypothesized or something. That's where I land for mythicism. I don't think, yeah, right, exactly, Maya. I don't think. Shit, now I got lost. I think that's a reasonable position.
Christ mythicist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's too far. It's a bridge too far to say, like.
I guess the problem I have with that is calling Jesus Christ. I mean, for the most part, the Beatitudes, if Jesus was preaching those things, or generally all apocalyptic preachers at the time were preaching those things, this desert dwelling, ousted group of, whatever they are, baptism, preaching, the Beatitudes, blessed are, or some variation. There is obviously a need for that. I mean, how many people in the world right now are looking for comfort for something?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the reason that the seed faith preachers get their success and grow their seeds is directly correlated to people who are desperate, could use some healing, are desperate, could use some funds to come from a miracle place. And just like I played with the David Chappelle clip, a lot of those folks didn't realize that the person who's bragging about the money that came from nowhere are probably in on the gig. The person who probably got healed by having hands laid on them of their stage 4 cancer probably sought out medical attention and had an immune system that maybe was failing at the beginning, but got jump-started by the medical science available in pharmaceuticals and procedures comparative for surgery. So at some point, I can believe you that you got healed, but it also could be rigged, just like the 3-card Monty game was.
Yeah.
And folks will give money. They'll give their last $10. Just hopefully it comes back to them. And some of them, will get what they need, because there's plenty of good-hearted people. Jesus Christ is basically Joshua the Good, essentially.
Yeah.
And human beings can be, I can be Jimmy the Tux. I can be Jimmy the Bowtie. I have those nicknames. They don't mean a whole lot. But there are people in this world that I have the email Jimmy the Bowtie. So, yeah.
Let me see if I can.
So I can be known as something. Hey, there's lots of guys in Chicago that have their middle name in parentheses, or middle nickname in parentheses. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, for instance.
There you go. Here's the book by Errol Doherty. I don't know if he cites Carrier or not, but there you go. I read that early on in my deconversion. I got to remember all the stuff in it.
I started to go down the path of Carrier, but I kind of left it quite a while ago.
Yeah. So to our buddy Ken, by the way, look, man, we went through your stuff. We got in your sock drawer. We found the dirty bits. We exposed them for everyone. Now you can put those away and try again. And maybe we'll play this game some more with you. We'll crawl into the bed of YouTube and roll around, baby. Let's do it.
It looks like he's got about 30 shorts. This is the only one that I looked at.
Oh boy. I don't know if I have the energy for more of that.
No, I don't either. But I am I was a little concerned about the optical illusion on this right here. It makes it look like there's somebody really tiny. I thought it was, I don't know why, but I thought it was like somebody who was like 4 inches tall or something. Like,
Look,
look at that right there. Those two right there.
we can't make fun of Polly Pocket preachers, man. They're just trying to do their best with what little they have.
I mean, I'm looking at that right there. And I'm like, what is he, like a Mattel miniature figure?
Right. Micro Machines, baby. Oh,
Yeah.
for a random aside, Daily, I you know how I covered what is this, a preacher for ants? You know, last week I covered Daily Disciple talking about
Oh
porn.
yeah, that was a great show.
Well, hey, here's the comment I left on his latest. I don't think you're ready for this. All right. Didn't you just make a guide to this, overcoming porn? I think you have your hands all over this issue. You must not have penetrated deep enough into your subscribers' pockets. You need to slide deeper inside them.
Oh,
Don't
my.
stop going in and out of this content. Wait, what's the last part I said? It will work for you eventually. You just need to lust more for success. It'll come. It's coming.
Oh,
You're
oh
gonna
my
come.
God.
You just
Oh,
need
God.
to flick the button more, just
Oh
right,
God.
and you'll have the release of the juice.
Oh, that's just wrong, Nitty.
It was so good. Somebody liked it too.
Wow.
Oh man.
Oh, I
So
feel like
somebody also, and I was just like, I'm on a roll. I can't stop.
oh my. That's rich. I feel like we should play this one right here. Look at this.
Oh,
Get that
somebody
expression.
also said in his comments, "This is perfect timing," and I said, "That's what she said."
That's what you said. That's funny. Well, I also recorded a comment that, because I had made a comment. I had made a comment about Ken not being fully honest on and I recorded his response, if we want to listen to that.
Ooh, sweet.
Let's see, let me change the share. I don't know if I can do this way. There we go. Let me know if you can hear this. Oh, hang on. Hang on. Let's find the beginning. There we go.
Oh, I can't hear it.
You cannot.
No. I don't know if you can share desktop audio very easily here without using OBS. For another day. For another day.
I can hear it. I'm the only one, huh?
Yep.
I might be able to do it this way.
That's why sharing it in a tab will work. If you export it as an
here we go.
MP3, and then
I do
open
have it
in
exported as an
Chrome.
MP3. Let me see if I can pull that up.
Yeah, so drag it to a Chrome tab and it should work.
And then drop it.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
And then you can share that. It's kind of a janky way to get around it, but it might work.
Might. Let's give it a try.
I know browsers can open MP3s if they really, 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 really want to. Welcome, Sincere. That's a great name. I like it.
Sincerely. All right, where do I find it? Recents.
I love it. Yes, he's only been having his people edge each other for 2,000 years. At least have to make it to 8K.
Here we go. Let's see if that did it.
You can.
Stop sharing. Let's share this instead.
We can do it. Yes, it looks like it'll go. All right, so put it on the stream and clicky to play.
Go. When did I conflate that? Please point to the exact words either I, or Mr. D for that matter, ever said in this video limiting the claim to a miraculous or God Jesus? You are not the only one to make this claim in these comments section. I understand that is what you want Mr. D to have claimed, but that is not what he said. In addition, there are
I think Mr. D is a reference to David from Atheist Experience.
Oh, okay.
ancient sources, such as the Babylonian Talmud, for example, that do acknowledge Jesus was thought to be a miracle worker. So your argument fails on that count as well. There is a reason why scholars of the time period virtually universally acknowledge not only that Jesus existed, but also that he was at least considered by many to be a miracle worker.
All right. What historians do you think labeled Jesus as a miracle worker?
Non-Christian, 0.
0.
Evidence matters, and it is the reason why Dr. Ehrman says anyone who denies these points looks foolish.
Okay. Was that what Dr. Ehrman said?
No.
No.
So, there is plenty of historical evidence from people who lived at the time of Jesus saying that yes, he indeed did perform miraculous acts.
I do not find evidence for that.
Matthew, John, Paul, James, Jude, Peter. You just...
Okay. That was a pretty good list. Are these, in my opinion, there are 0 moments in which there is an exclamation of, wow, you're not going to believe what Jesus just told me. I thought he was dead. He came back. He's now a God. He's the most amazing being I've ever met. And we did this together.
Oh, right.
In that list, is there any moment in which Jesus is confirmed as a God? I did X with Jesus as a God. Jesus told me after I found out he was a God. We went and experienced this together. The closest thing I think we have is the Doubting Thomas story, which is a hearsay moment.
Right. Well, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, because the gospel authors, again, anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. So funny. Well, I said, he said, I used to date that chick, and I said, she really loved your input. And then he goes, I had to dump her, never output.
Oh my goodness, that's funny.
So, yeah, the if you just grant all the authorship of all those epistles, even those, almost most of the time, don't. Only 1 John, I think, chapter 1, makes a claim for an earthly Jesus. That's it.
And is John written by, because it's a Johannine work.
Oh.
Do we know who wrote John? John 1, 1 John.
Right. I have to look and see if that is one of the authentic Johannine works, or like, I know that 2nd and 3rd John are just right out, forgeries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the Gospel of John and Revelation bear the most bear the most content that probably written by the same person.
Let's see what else he has to say. Oh, by the way, he brought up Jude. When you read the book of Jude, I find it fascinating that it's a very short verse. You can read it in roughly 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I love that it basically states hey, we're doing this. It's for the good of everything, but we might be deceived. And not only might we be deceived, but we've been infiltrated. So,
Right.
so good
Well-
luck with everything. And let's start Revelation.
Well, the other funny thing about that book is that it utilizes apocryphal ideas as if they're just completely valid tradition in the first place.
Yeah.
There's no apologists are like, oh, God is using that text as a place to help the author convey an idea, right? But that's just completely absurd, right? It's just like you could have picked anything else, right? It doesn't have to be another scripture of any kind. Or sorry, at least a scripture that paints God or the whole narrative in a completely different or unacceptable light. And here we go. This guy's just like, I don't have a problem with it. Why do we make the inference that we have to jump through extra hoops to explain why that the usage of those texts is there when there's a much simpler explanation? He didn't give a shit because that's what he wanted to do. He believed in those texts. Didn't matter. In fact, maybe he really, really, really believed in them, and that's exactly why he makes the comparisons that he does.
Well, how many writers could we have about that wow moment of exclamation? Could we have a first-person account of the women that found the tomb empty?
Oh, but
Do
women
we-
didn't know how to write, so
No, we don't have their first-hand account either. How about the guards? Could we have the guards? Pontius Pilate? Do we have the account of Pontius Pilate's amazement
No
that somebody
persons.
survived after 3 days being dead? 2.5 days being dead? How about the 12? Do we have a first-hand account and a wow exclamation saying, this is what I did with Jesus. This is what Jesus told me after he was back.
Oh, well, actually, First Peter has a weird thing. What we saw, he says like something like what we saw on the mountain.
Yeah, it's what we saw. It's not I saw.
Oh, yeah. And I guess you have to make the assumption that First Peter is also authentic.
Yes.
Is First Peter authentic.
Yeah.
Although the text identifies Peter as its author, the language, dating, style, and structure of this letter have led most scholars to conclude it's synonymous.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the Yale courses, the guy who does the New Testament studies really points the opening statements up and compares it. And he does a pretty good job showing it. It's worded a little different than the norm. That it was probably written well into the 2nd century. Actually. What about Joseph of Arimathea?
Oh,
Do we have an
definitely.
account? Wow, you're not going to believe this. I donated this rock cut tomb that my family had. It's in a beautiful garden. The gardeners are
Problematic.
absolutely sexy and drop dead gorgeous. You're not going to believe it. But this guy came back to life after only being in there for like 2.5 days. It was amazing. Anything
Well-
from Joseph of Arimathea? No. And what about Jesus himself? First person account of his exploratory as being a human, coming back, being God, passing on his final words of wisdom. Or do we just have a nerd Jesus that everybody says exists, but it's not really there?
Eric, you want to know something funny about this? Is that historically, there's a possibility that gardeners in the Greco-Roman era, how hot it gets outside, worked in the nude or nearly nude. And so, Jesus
No
presumably
case for Jesus homosexuality there.
Well, hang on. Jesus, under all the burial clause, what's he going to wear? A fucking pair of trousers under there? No. His ass is naked. Now, when Mary sees him in the garden, she mistakes him for a gardener. And if he rose outside of the cloths, what else would he be wearing? His holy birthday suit. It's very easy to mistake a naked person with tears in your eyes for another one. So my thesis is Jesus rose naked, deal with it. What like God's like, oh, hang on. Poof. You needed some spare clothes to keep your holy wang from flopping around for all y'all.
All right, let's see what else. It's got 24 seconds
Do
left.
not want to count them because they are Christian sources. To say that is stacking the deck is an understatement. Your argument essentially amounts to if we ignore all these contemporaneous authors who were eyewitnesses to the divine Jesus performing miracles.
All right, what authors do we have that Jesus was divine? What authors do we have?
Right. Well,
Like,
even that.
Paul says he was divine, but Paul is practicing with a vision Jesus, not a, it's not like Jesus sought out Paul while he was around. He had to seek out Paul through a theophany.
Right.
And if Jesus had just gone ahead and done his job in the first place and completed his task before he left, he wouldn't need Paul.
Well, the other thing is like, I think even in Acts, like the recounting of Paul's vision, there are people right there with him who are like, what the hell just happened?
Oh, okay. BS. BS is commenting on the naked gardener.
Yeah.
He says he only trims his bush in the nude.
Oh my God, purple. Oh my God.
Oh, that's funny.
Who had the longer
well done.
dick,
Well
Jesus
done,
or
Perp.
Willem Dafoe? I mean, I gotta know.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen that movie with William Dafoe. That was because basically he lives.
Yeah. But anyway.
He lives, but then don't they snap it back to him dying again or something? How did that end? I'm trying to remember. I don't remember. I've drank and slept since.
Oh, somebody mentioned in the chat something about the name Arimathea. Yeah, it means good disciple. The narrative function. Sorry,
yeah.
Do you want me to go on or not?
Carrier says that it's Carrier that's the source, and he says it's some variation of a Greek word put together as disciple town or something like that.
Right. And so now if we look at his narrative function, which is to bury Jesus, he bears the same first name as the father, Joseph, who was supposed to bury his son. He's not there. So who's going to bury the son? The good disciple. Who's not going to bury the son? Jesus's followers or his actual dad, right? So it's an inversion of expectation, that this good disciple comes out of nowhere from the top rope to fucking bury this dude, which hilariously, like, start thinking about the logistics of Mr. Arimathea's task, right? Okay, first off, he's going to authorities that would probably rather he die than give up the body of the man they just crucified due to a political insurrection. 2, he just happens to have a wagon and a burial cloth just sitting in the wings to roll off his friend into the sunset towards his tomb, right? Or sorry, there's during the Passover, there's a late night burial cloth shop open, and he's just like, holy shit, I better go get something to wrap my buddy in to get him off the cross. No super duper Sam's Club, Walmart burial cloth store will be fucking open on the Passover. So either Josephus is pulling this cloth out of his ass, or nobody's thinking very critically about this narrative, and that's why he can just materialize shit he needs to make the story go. Then this motherfucker, let's say he had the cloth. He just had one. He's like, you know what? Someone could die at any minute. I'm going to go take this cloth that's sitting right here. I'm going to go get my buddy. It'll go great with the authorities. I'm going to get him, and I'm going to take him to the tomb. All right, here we go. I'm going to carry a dead man all by myself an unknown distance to my family tomb.
Makes sense to me. First
What?
century
Okay.
Galilee.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's fucking ripped, right? So
No
he's
problem.
just picking up this Jesus. He's throwing him on a funerary bier, which also he had to have laying around. Like someone could die any second. Well, lucky me. I've got a cloth and a first century funerary bier lying around, which you don't know. It's like a multi-handled gurney that would take a few guys to march a dead guy around town. Yeah, he's just got one of those. He's just gonna whip it out and take it all the way to the temple or wherever Herod was chilling at the time with the Roman, whatever. It doesn't or Pilate, doesn't fucking matter. He's rolling over this beer and this cloth around. He's like, come on, please guys, give me Jesus. I got some work to do. And they're like, fine. So he gets the body and he's wrapping it in a shroud. Now he's got to either have one shroud to make the Shroud of Turin or two shrouds, because imagine getting this bloodied ass dead guy, wrapping him up and carrying his ass all over town and then putting him in a tomb. You know what that shroud's going to look like? It's going to look like a fucking tampon. I'm sorry. A maxi pad on the fourth week. It's not going to look like this nice, painted on Jesus body. Okay, now Joseph's got two cloths and he's got the help carrying Jesus around. No, the text doesn't say that. He did all this shit on his own. He had two cloths, funerary beer around. Miracle.
Oh boy.
End rant. Should I make a short out of that? I don't know. There you go. I hope that was entertaining to people to just think through that shit.
That's funny.
Or it's just a narrative device, right? Oh, the good disciple, to fulfill prophecy, buries him in his rich ass temple. Done. Sorry, tomb. Done. Right? All this shit, we don't have to figure all this out. It doesn't matter, right? Because they have a story to tell, and that's what it is. It's a story to tell. The details in this case don't matter. So Eric Manning, the details matter for the green grass, for the fucking feeding of the 5,000, for when Jesus gets in the boat and plays hiddly diddly with his preaching all over Judea. Like, all that shit matters, but how Jesus gets his ass from Pilate from the cross to a beautiful tomb in a garden from one guy, the details don't matter.
No.
Double standard details. I love it. I'm not, frustrated with undesigned coincidences at all. Am I?
No. No. That's ridiculous. Let's see
we're at
what
the lovely 2-hour mark here.
Yeah, let's see what Ken has to say. And
Then there aren't any historical records of a divine Jesus performing miracles. If you cannot see the obvious illogic of that position, then there is nothing anyone could ever say to convince you.
I'm not convinced.
Not me neither.
Not convinced. So, yes, I am not convinced. I don't believe that any of the historical references to Jesus are legitimate historical references to Jesus. I do believe that there are some folks about 100 years after Jesus that are like, okay, tell me again who this Jesus guy is. Are you kidding me? This is the best you got? And they're responding to this. Josephus may be responding to it in a manner that is constructive, but I just don't think it's a good solid foundation to base your faith on.
Yeah. Since we're probably close to the end here, I just want to say, like, my other thing about this is, like, I don't think the effort or work to historicize or to try and anchor Jesus as a fully literal human person who actually walked the earth as a God man, I don't think that effort was seriously undertaken until the mid-second century or later. And because if you kind of like go with oh God, now name is escaping me again, Dennis MacDonald's work, right, about how the Gospels are in better step with, you know, some form of Greek storytelling, you know, with what the things they borrow, the things they utilize, the motifs that are present within. The way that they're written don't necessitate, if you are more skeptical, they don't necessitate that any of that actually happened. Right?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Ken, if you ever do watch this and you get this far into the program after all the swearing and innuendos.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
I would just like to say, if you juxtaposition of Jesus did it, Jesus wrote about it, Jesus is protecting that word by miracle, even still today. And you compare that to what you have now. Us atheists are not interested in just how close you got to having a legitimate foundation. We want to see a real foundation.
Yep.
And it's not good enough to quote somebody from the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century or church fathers or anything like that. There's just not very good evidence for Jesus being God. And compounded by the fact that about 20 times in your holy book, there are warnings of deception or some variation of false teachers, false prophets, devils, demons. And as far as I can tell, we don't have any evidence any of those exist today either. So let's...
Except for, you know, crazy people doing crazy shit.
Crazy people doing crazy shit. So, Ken, this is what I'm asking for. Is there evidence that you can provide that God, Yahweh, El, Hashem, Adonai exists? That Jesus exists as a supernatural being? Instead of calling him inert Jesus, you would be able to show me evidence that it's God Jesus. I don't need evidence that human Jesus exists. I think historically, Bart Ehrman has made it pretty clear. A human being named Jesus did preach and teach. May not have done a very good job, in my opinion, but he did do it. That there's a Holy Spirit, that there's a Satan and a devil, that there exists demons or angels, and that there is an entity place called heaven or hell, and you have evidence of any one of these 8 things. Once you garner this evidence, I will need to see an alibi that the deceiver isn't working in cahoots with any of these beings, just like in the story of Job. That God, Yahweh, El, isn't just a regular old boss of the devil. If you could prove that the devil exists, it doesn't interfere with any of our free will. If Jesus exists as a God, can't be in cahoots, couldn't have accepted the Luke 4, Matthew 4 invitation that he finds tempting according to the Luke 4 narrative. Bless you.
Yeah.
that the Bible isn't in cahoots of these deceivers. And that angels in Revelations 12:9, because some of them are regarded as bad, also aren't in cahoots with any of these listed things. Now, I ask that because it is suspicious to see one Jesus in John 3:16, the most famous verse in the Bible. I just find it hard to believe that the most amazing God of all time gave his only begotten son. Because gave means bloody Jesus. Bloody Jesus is your key to the free gift of salvation. And
Wrapped in a maxi pad and carried to the tomb.
Wrapped in a maxi pad, carried to the tomb. And that I find it hard to believe that God can only have one son. In fact, I would just like to suggest that God could probably have a lot of daughters and sons, and we could have them here today providing the information necessary so that we make good, solid decisions, good, informed decisions on whether or not God exists or existed in a part human. So, what do you have to? What say you? I've done my preaching. What say you, Nitty?
I mean, I've said all my shit. I'm good, except for my cat who took a really stinky dump, and now I need to get out of here. I'm gonna be streaming about something tomorrow. I don't know what. I'll find something.
Wow. All right. Well. Let's do the moment of Zen then. I'm going to play my one of my favorites from G. Snyder. And we'll call that the moment of Zen. Thanks for coming on, Nitty. And thanks for everybody for tuning in.
Oh yeah.
Appreciate it. And Bowtie bless you all. Here's a moment of Zen.
Might help if you. There you go.
And the Holy Spirit spoke to me. The gift of faith came on me. He said, kick her in the face with your biker boot. I inched closer and I went like this. Bam! Boom, bam, 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 bam.
Prophetic wrath.